Apparently no one else is coming, so. Board will come to order. We'd like to welcome everyone and anyone wishing to speak to any of the applications. Please indicate so you can be heard. Thank you. First on the agenda is Raymond Adkins. Someone here to represent him.
Yes, ma'am. Joseph Scott,
I'd
PO
like
Box
to-
315, Kilmark, Virginia 22482.
Read the ad. Raymond Adkins and care of Joseph Scott requests permission to construct 240 linear feet of riprap revetment and 215 linear feet of stone seal with associated nourishment and plantings along the shoreline of Taylor's Creek located off Virginia State Highway 222, Williams Road on Norris Drive, tax map number 27-109A and VMRC number 21-0786. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Joey Scott. I'm the agent for the applicant. This stretch of shoreline here is, they're going to build a living shoreline, and a portion of it that they're planning on doing some grading on, which is the existing portion where there's pretty much only lawn grass there, and you've got that big pine tree at the top, and you got a good chunk of the bank sloughing right now into the water. And then the other section is not as bad, but it has a lot of mature oak trees that they're hoping to be able to preserve, so they've applied to do a revetment on that particular side of it. And the site's kind of, well, it's not kind of, the site is like a lot of sites you see at the headwaters of creeks, where you've got ravines that kind of run down the middle and here and there, and then you've got knolls. And what they're basically going to do is shave that, the knoll to the, I want to say left as you're looking at the water. I don't know if that's north or south. They're going to modify that one because that's got just a lot of sand and everything bleeding into the water, and taper it right into the existing ravine that's that's on the left-hand side there too. And then there's another one on the right where the dock is. So, if you have any questions, or, well, I guess you have to open it up for public comment, but I can take any questions after that.
Okay, it's open to the board for comments.
All right, don't have any problem.
Anyone have any concern?
I have a couple points of clarification, Joey. It looks, you basically got two banks there doing the same thing. One happens to be wooded,
Right.
the other non-wooded, with mostly that 1/3 of an acre you've marked there with lichens growing all over it. And I guess I'd like to hear why that extensive grading of hundreds of yards of soil should be removed. And I'm very concerned about the flow and sediment that's now going to be discharged right into the living shoreline and the wetland plants. Why is that even being considered?
That was part of the plan that has been put forth by the contractor and the folks who are building the home along with their architect. And they just thought that, well, I don't want to speculate, but I'm assuming that the idea was it would just transition right into the living shoreline at the base, and they would be able to do, replanting and all that sort of stuff. We're in the process now of getting a planting plan together. I've talked to Brian and Hannah about that in terms of trying to make it kind of transitional where it's all lawn grass there anyway, and it's running down into the middle of the ravine that has a wetland. So, from my standpoint as agent, I mean, it is a considerable amount of grading, but we're not removing a ton of canopy. There's nothing existing there except a pine tree, and I would hope that the creation of the living shoreline and the Bay Act plan that we're going to put forth to try to filter some of that at the bottom would actually be somewhat of a better situation than what's there now, where it's just bleeding straight into the waterway. So that's, but this is part of a plan that, a building plan that I didn't necessarily create, but it's something that, I'm okay with on my end of things, just mainly because it's all existing lawn grass anyway. So I think the transition and modification of it's actually going to be somewhat better in the long run, because it will actually allow a filtration system to an extent right there at the base of it, because the tentative plan that I've talked with the applicant about is actually putting in lots of salt bushes and bayberries and all that sort of stuff right at the point above high water coming up the bank, so that we can actually make this a living shoreline in continuity, versus one that you might stick at the base of a bank and high tide comes up on the bank and you can't plant any bushes or do anything like that.
So you're working on that plan too?
Yes. I met with Brian and Hannah. We've kind of been going back and forth about it for a while now, to get preliminary numbers for what needs to be planted in terms of trees, bushes, in compliance with the Bay Act stuff. And we're at a point now where we want to change some of that. So we're doing the trade-off thing where, how many bushes for trees or whatever, because the overall goal, and the applicant to this point has not indicated to me that they're against it. She very much wanted the living shoreline and actually wished that she could do more of it, but she doesn't necessarily want to remove all those oaks on the other side. So she's very much behind trying to recreate this area in terms of making it natural and look natural to transition into the shoreline that's there. But we don't actually have the numbers completed yet because we're still trying to map that out.
Well, you know, this is another case, in my opinion, where we're trying to do a great job on the living shoreline areas, and we're doing about the most unliving treatment to a graded area that's going to cause more sedimentation, more overland flow to what is proposed in this application. So I think we're going in the wrong direction here.
Well, I disagree because I think that what's there already is already bleeding into the waterway, and I think that this is a way to stabilize it. And, you know, this is not an area where you're going to have to remove a lot of trees to do that. So we're trying to recreate it in the best way possible in terms of being able to stabilize it and do that. Could there be less of a slope? You know, that's potentially could be the issue. And when we get down to the brass tacks of having to do the RPA stuff, it may end up that way because the applicants and the contractors may find out that there's a lot more planning there than they want to do. So maybe they have to, you know, reconfigure the slope and not lay it down so flat. But, you know, 5-10 years ago, VIMS was yelling at us about grade the bank, lay it down as flat as possible, 4-to-1, 5-to-1, you know, transition into a living shoreline. And I've done that 3 times in this county now and got yelled at all 3 times because of the breakwater systems and trying to lay it down so that it would be more of a natural transition and actually slow some of the runoff. But I mean, you're right. I mean, it's going to be accelerated runoff in that particular area to a certain extent because you're trying to grade it down. But the other thing is there's a ravine on each side of it. All that water is already running there anyway. It's just a centralized point. I mean, I would really think that you're spreading it over more space by doing it this way. But I'm not an engineer, so.
Anyone else? Can't see. Brian, Hannah? Do you have
The
any?
only thing I would say is, as we talked about on the site with the Bay Act issues, and you have your kind of staff response to that in your agenda later on. Some of what Mr. Scott is talking about is correct. And I'll just tell you from a staff perspective, the SEAS program with DCR is out there. And while I don't want to be on record as criticizing them, sometimes their recommendations run counter to the Bay Act general criteria. And that has been an issue, and it's actually been raised. I have kind of tried to keep quiet about it somewhat, and actually some non-governmental organizations are kind of beating that drum right now, including Wetlands Watch and the Bay Foundation are saying, hey, SEAS is going around in the state and telling people, they're giving people agricultural recommendations for residential property, and they're telling them, grade all these banks back. And in some cases, by the time you put a living shoreline out front, you don't have to do much with that cliff behind it because now the tidal erosion is somewhat ameliorated and it's not as big of a deal. But yeah, I think for a long time there was a big push, even 10-to-1. I saw VIMS reports back in the day of 10-to-1. Grade the bank back 10-to-1. And yeah, and that was, I think we have to keep in mind that those recommendations are given kind of in a microscope bubble. I would like this board, I think this board is a little more macro view. We try to consider all the bigger view, the 30,000 square foot view, and I think that's good. But just keep in mind, some of these agencies like SEAS and others, they only see their little click up, they're used to giving ag recommendations. The same people that do that work also come out to my farm and help me engineer, a watering station for my livestock and stuff. So they, the old saying, stay in your lane. sometimes, I think we just need to take it with a grain of salt when they're out here telling people, take out all the trees because the trees are gonna erode the bank. That's kind of faulty thought process, but nonetheless, they're out there.
Jay?
Well, since we're waxing philosophic, first of all, the board is reviewing the impacts of the intertidal zone within your jurisdiction by the law. The high tide line or the back end of the jurisdiction becomes the Bay Act. Yes, C's used to say grade the bank back, stabilize. Vim said grade the bank back, stabilize. I'm going to take it a different direction. Living shorelines, stone, fill, and plants in the intertidal zone is by definition a living shoreline as far as Virginia is concerned. That's good, but I've heard VIMs recently say, if you build a living shoreline in front of a riprap revetment, you really haven't created a living shoreline because the riprap revetment doesn't allow the continuity to go this way with sea level rise and retreat and resilience and all this, So is a living shoreline in front of a bluff? It's a living shoreline, no question about it. Does it allow for the landward migration of sea level? Not really, until the bank keeps eroding naturally over time since John Smith got here. Do we want to stop that? And all the nutrients that are locked up in those, stabilize it so it doesn't erode any longer. Plant with vegetation, either definite or by definition, tidal wetland or natural bayscape kind of stuff. I don't know. This is, again, the living shoreline. I think it's just better for the board. If I were the board, I would be more interested in staying in my lane. Is it the right way to do? Look at it like this? Well, that's what your jurisdiction is. If you end up denying or approving things outside your jurisdiction, that's when we got to go. It's like VMRC going over to the Potomac River. Guess what? That's Maryland. So jurisdictionally, I think you can make those points all you want, but each time, I think as we learn to live with the living shoreline, all we can do is follow the law as we know it and what our jurisdiction is. And is that what we want? I don't. Do you want windmills? Doesn't matter. We got however many impacts to tidal wetlands we need to approve or deny today. And it needs our permit because of the stone going channelward to low water. For what it's worth, I'll just reiterate, we don't charge a royalty for stone out in the water because we look at that as habitat. Part of the habitat that's being created with this living shoreline that then migrates landward. Lyle Varnell is like, it has to allow for landward migration of sea level rise. So we have to allow people's property to erode or how about we stabilize it? Anyway.
Public comment?
Anyone else have any?
I just have one comment, and, this board, every member of this board took an oath of office to uphold all laws in the Commonwealth and the county. And I just think we're closing our eyes if we think we're going to segment this thing. But from an environmental standpoint, there is no doubt that more discharge, more sediment is going to occur from this third of an acre when all the topsoils.
I'm sorry.
I'm not discussing this, I'm making a comment.
I'm sorry.
And with both the comments you made about the advisory agencies who have no regulatory responsibility, VIMs, Cs, or whoever else, I could care less what they said 5 years ago. They're not here today. We've got to make a decision, but I'm very concerned about the projects we've seen in the last 3 years that continue to create what I consider road grades and cutting off hundreds of yards of soil that's going to negate the benefits of this living shoreline. You know, for some of us, you know, guess what? There's going to be a new house here, and guess where it's going to be built, and guess what we want to do to cut everything down so we can see the edge of the water. That's the purpose of the land grading. Let's get real. And the one tree that's out there is a pretty good specimen. Probably the oak tree is going to go too with it, the two trees that are left. The only thing out there now is not turf grass, mostly lichens because of the acidity of this clay soil. Highly erosive clay soil. The plans say it's going to be graded back greater than 3 to 1. It's going to get mowed, and no matter what the plan says, Brian, how many times have we seen this? The plan's great, the shrubs are all planted, in 5 years, it'll be fescue. That's all my comments.
Anyone, if no one else has any comments, I'll entertain a motion.
Well, look, open up the
Yes,
public
please,
hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And make sure we check with anybody online as well.
Oh, that's still available? Okay.
I don't think that's ever going to go away.
Middlesex said, we're done.
Really? Okay.
Pardon me? What was that comment?
Middlesex, I had a Middlesex meeting on Tuesday, in person like the old days, and they no longer have access online. It's
Oh.
the meeting or miss it.
Huh, okay. Yeah, do you have anybody, Mr. Rowe? Okay.
Anyone right there? Are we ready for motion then?
Say again, I'm sorry.
Are we ready to make this motion?
I am.
Okay. I make a motion that someone state what we need to be doing.
Well, I think, based on my understanding of our jurisdiction on this wetlands board, that we have no grounds to disapprove this project. And I'd like to make a motion to approve the project as submitted. I'll second that.
Motion's been made and second. All in favor, signify by raising your right hand. 3 opposed. Okay, it's 4 to 1. Okay. I have a copy of this.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, the next on the agenda is Carrie Snyder. Am I saying it correctly? Someone here to represent him? Okay, come forward, please.
Could you,
State your
Edna,
name
make
for the-
sure you speak up, please, in the microphone.
I'm-
Make sure you're speaking up.
Okay. State your name for the record, please.
Good morning, my name is Bob Clater.
I'd like to read the ad, please. Carrie Snyder and Kira Robert Clater request permission to construct 35 linear feet of riprap revetment along the shoreline of Carter Creek located off Virginia State Highway 634, King Carter Drive on Quails Trail, tax map number 33-321, VMRC number 21-0955. Go ahead, sir.
This property, the coastline is currently riprap revetment, except for this 35-foot section. Above this 35-foot section is a steep bank, heavily wooded, heavily shaded. So the request is simply to extend the existing riprap revetment, the additional 35 feet to the end of the property line, to prevent it further erosion to that shoreline.
Mr. Barnes and Hannah, is this the lady that spoke with you all on site. I don't know, was I hearing that she was requesting to table this?
I think she did say that. I don't know if she made that formal or not. Yeah, we don't have anything formal on that.
Well, then in that case, if she's wishing to,
You have the ability to hear it today and then table your decision until next month. You will have
okay.
a meeting in
that'll-
July, and
That's
that'll
what
give
I'm
us-
getting
yeah.
at. We don't want to approve something if she wants to change.
That gives her
something.
the option to, if she changes her mind. I'm not sure if that was a spur of the moment thing. That's why I'm a little
Well,
reluctant to tell you.
it's like
that
I
we
said,
shouldn't
we'll
it.
hear it and then table it until next month. That way to give her a chance to respond to us in writing her concerns. Go ahead, sir.
By way of email, I did see that there was some discussion of tabling it. She did not express her interest to table it. She just said it was brought up. But as far as I know, she did not say, she did not direct me to come and table this. As far as I know, she's still interested in having the revetment.
But, sir, we have to to make sure that what we're doing is what we should be doing. If she wishes to change this, then she should have gotten in touch with Mr. Barnes or Hannah and expressed that in writing or whatever to approve this as it stands. With that in question, where do we stand? So we can hear it, and you can proceed with it. And I agree with Mr. Barnes that possibly table it until next month so that we can check back with her to see her concerns. How do you feel, Hannah and Brian?
I agree with that. I think that's
Y'all agree? Okay. We'll go ahead and we'll,
I concur with that. We can table this.
would you wish to proceed now or just table it and see what she wishes and come back next month?
Proceed is in presenting the case. Yeah, I'm welcome to answer any questions that anybody may have of the project. Again, it was fairly straightforward at adding a riprap revetment for the 35 remaining feet of the coastline. If you went out there, you saw the bank is steep and it's heavily wooded and heavily shaded, and the residence is on top of the hill there. So it seemed like a very beneficial project to me, but I will consult with Lucy and make sure that this is the way she wants to proceed.
Well, what, I'm concerned about is her wishes and what she was discussing on site, but we have nothing in writing or anything to show what she would like.
Correct, and I don't either. I don't have anything to present other
Well,
than.
Mr. Barnes
we
and
presented
Hannah?
The revetment idea, and she signed off on that, and that's.
Should we proceed with this?
Properly advertised item,
Yeah.
you want to have it heard?
Yes,
Go ahead then.
Yeah, if you hear it, the minute you open it up to public comment, it's legally a hearing, so you can hear it with his consent, and then you have to make a decision within 30 days. If you don't hear it today, that time doesn't start until next month, but it may be, he's here and it's been properly advertised. It may be efficient to hear it today, and then if in the meantime he and his client decide to not pursue it, then you have your decision for next month.
Okay. Okay, proceed.
that, as far as definition of the project, that was all I had. I'd be welcome to entertain any questions if there's anything unclear.
Does anyone on the board wish to speak to this?
Yeah, I have a question. Why? You only got 35 feet of proposed riprap.
Right,
and
there are
from-
signs of
from-
erosion, and the biggest issue for me was the proximity of the residents on the hillside above.
So you feel like it protect the
Yes,
residents, which is not more than 15, 20 feet away from the,
right.
okay. And by the way, we didn't see a wetland sign there, which is a requirement of this board.
We can get you a few before you leave.
Was not aware, I apologize for that, this is my first hearing in Lancaster County.
Anyone else?
Are the benchmarks set on this site?
Yes, they're on the mean low water, but they're, if you're at the site, I'd have to could see the stakes from, without getting wet.
Are they on the plans, the application?
The stakes?
Are they indicated on your plans?
I don't think I marked the stakes, but they are there are only two stakes, one at the beginning of the section and one at the end.
Oh.
Uh,
Could this be added? Oh, these benchmarks need to be added,
Brian,
showing start and stop.
Brian, do you all consider this a complete application?
It is lacking benchmarks, I will say that, and,
In addition to that?
yeah, and one of the other things on the site was generally, we like to see staking that marks the true footprint of any structure. In some cases, you have agents putting flags or staking at the top of the bank where the riprap will be hitting at the top of the bank, and then PVC stakes marking the toe of the riprap. That way, when the board looks at the site, they know exactly the footprint of where the impact is going to be. There are some stakes out front, pretty far out in the water, or pretty far out away from the base of the bank, and I'm not sure.
Yeah, those were existing, they weren't mine, I'm not
Right,
sure where they
yeah,
came from.
so it was a little bit confusing on Tuesday to see a matrix of stakes out there. That may be something, not just for this project, but others, to make sure that you know, in the case of groins, if they're rock groins, we want to see the stakes on either side kind of going out, especially outside and upper extent, and that way you can infer where the impact is going to be. And in this case, if it's holding tight to the bank, the drawing is kind of unclear as to exactly where the structure would be with regards to the actual bank features that we saw. Where her existing riprap ends, there is a little bit of a flanking that happened there, but beyond that, there is really a nice wooded kind of bank right down to the water, and there's not really a whole lot of active detrimental erosion, at least that I could see.
So the answer to my question is?
Yeah, that's up to,
Is this a complete application? I don't see any slope on the rock. I don't see elevations.
The section view doesn't,
Is woefully inadequate. I don't see any detrimental erosion nor threat to any property. And did I hear you say that some of those stakes aren't your stakes?
there are stakes in the water that were not put there by me, yes.
What are those indicating?
I don't know, they were there before when I went into the water, they were there. There is if you were there is a gully that, there are certainly some erosion issues with the gully that will need to be addressed at some point, but that's not the purpose of this project.
Correct, and I believe it's not even on her property.
You are correct. So, yeah, that's a separate issue. But I don't know if somebody else was looking at the erosion from the gully and doing some work there. That's all I can say is they're not my stakes.
So your design here doesn't address any of that issue?
No, this is just the embankment surrounding the residence.
And for Jay, on the permit type here, you have uncertain. Can you enlighten me on that?
Yeah, I think I asked for additional information. I sent an email, which the way we do it nowadays is, if I have a question, I go directly to the agent. That's what he's for. And that email gets copied to my secretary so that it goes into the file. I don't have my file up now, but that database is where, the application resides, any revisions resides, any comments from VIMS, Cs, wetland. So I'm pretty sure I had some questions about his numbers. Let me see here. The drawing would indicate, the stone would be right to the mean low water line on the section view, 4 feet tall, doesn't have a width, but I think his impacts were inconsistent.
Yeah, I did send in a revision.
Non-vegetated wetlands 70, channel ward of mean low water 1 foot. Well, I think we worked that out, or I asked for a revision to, is it a foot channel ward of low water, or is it at low water? And if it's a foot lower than low water, then it's 35 times 1 would be 35 feet on subaqueous bottom. That all goes through my review of the application if things aren't matching up. So right now, it's uncertain because I don't know whether it needs a permit from me or not. The drawing would indicate no. The appendix would indicate yes.
I thought I sent that revision in, but
I might have gotten it, and I'm telling you, the old days of when it gets in your inbox and you pull it
Yeah.
out, now it's in my inbox and I haven't looked at it yet. I
Would-
gotta go
would
to
you be-
somewhere else to make sure it's even,
Would you
not
be
just in my
willing-
inbox, but in the database inbox. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's all right.
Would you be willing to table this until we have these questions answered?
yes.
Okay, I understand that you requesting to table this until all the questions that has been asked, we have fully answered. Is that
And-
correct?
Correct.
And comments from the homeowner.
And comments from the homeowner as to her wishes? And a revised drawing showing all the necessary things that it needs to show, and you could get with Brian or Hannah, and I'm sure they'd be happy to.
Memorandum 57.
help. Huh?
Memorandum 57.
Yeah.
Right?
How many looks at it anymore?
And specifically, the location of the structure.
Yes.
The structure being the
Yeah,
revetment
the house, yeah.
to the house.
In relationship to the,
Benchmarks. Well,
Okay.
But I have one more question, thank you. Jay, on page 5 of the JPA, there's a section here regarding living shorelines,
page 5.
or page 8, excuse me, page 8. Could you comment on that regarding the new guidelines?
Could I comment on that? Let me read it again. A living shoreline was considered. The revetment option is being proposed because the bank above the shoreline is roughly 15 feet tall, with a slope greater than 1 to 1, steeper than 1 to 1. It was feared that the runoff would wash out the sand fill of a living shoreline. The steep slope also makes maintaining the plantings from the land side extremely tricky. There are no paths, and maintenance from the water is likewise tricky. I don't have my glasses, I apologize. Because the river floor is dangerously soft due to existing silt runoff. Also concerned that the soft floor would not provide a stable platform for riprap sill. I guess I would say that he has provided an explanation, whether you agree with it or not, as to why a living shoreline was considered and decided against.
Do you consider that sufficient?
I consider it a statement that he's provided that makes the application complete. And ultimately, I would probably have to ask VIMS, because VIMS is the best available science that we have at our avail to answer that question.
You been on the site?
I have not been on the site. I'm gonna hit it on the way out today.
And last question, Mr. Clater, on page 6, your comment about dead or damaged debris, trees will be removed from the shoreline as necessary. No clearing or grading is required. The primary access will be by water. The term "as necessary" is not definitive. I don't know if that's one tree or 50 trees.
There's one large tree specifically that is fallen and will need to be removed.
Well, I would just ask that you be definitive on your application and let us know. As necessary doesn't tell us anything.
Anyone else? Ron? Do you have anything? Hannah? Okay, the agent is requesting that we table this until which time he has the opportunity to present a revised drawing showing the details of what he needs to show us as discussed today. Do I hear a motion, please?
Move that the project be tabled.
All-
Second.
All in favor, signify by raising your hand. Okay. Thank you. If you get with, sir, if you get with Mr. Barnes or Hannah, I'm sure they will clarify what you need to do in order to get everything straight.
A final question, if this is the case, Brian, you need something in writing to request withdrawal, or from the landowner or from the agent, or either?
Yeah, and I think Jay was kind of alluding to that staff get really nervous about saying, hey, somebody wants to table something without it being either an email or something in writing, even if it's just a line that says, would like to table, just because of the time and effort involved.
Needs to be in writing, but you would accept that from either the authorized agent or the landowner?
Correct, yes, sir, yeah.
Thanks.
Since they're on the application. If it was somebody whose name wasn't on the application, I think that would be a little ambiguous, but, yeah.
Thanks.
Next on the agenda is Shane Cunningham. Someone here to represent him?
Yeah, it's Joseph Scott, P.O. Box 315, Kilmarnock, Virginia, 22482. I'm the agent for the applicant.
Read the ad, please. Shane Cunningham and Carrie Joseph Scott is requesting permission to construct 85 linear feet of riprap revetment and 110 linear feet of stone seal with associated nourishment and plantings along the shoreline of Punch's Cove off of the eastern branch of the Currituck River located off Virginia State Highway 1075, Eagle Trace on Eagle Point Road, tax map number 22D-1-60, BMRC number 21-1017. Go ahead.
Yes, so Mr. Cunningham is having a problem that we've seen a lot of in areas like this over the last 12 months with all the rain and sort of stuff that we had. The bank is basically collapsing. There's a lot of water running out of it on the face of it there to the left side of the dock, which would be the south side. So the plan is to just put some stone at the base of that, remove the trees and stuff that have slumped, when I say trees, the small trees and shrubs that have slumped down the hill to kind of shore that up. And then they can go around the outer edge there where they're having a little bit of erosion, but it's nothing that's huge with the stone sill and some sand fill and plantings on that other side. So the worst part of it really is the bank face that's sloughed off, and there's no planned grading on this particular project per talking directly to the contractor and Mr. Cunningham. It's going to be, as some of the contractors say, stone at the base and let the bank grade itself. Just do whatever it's going to do, but keep it from continuing to fall into the water. So if you have any questions or...
Anyone on the board have any concerns about this?
I'd just like to compliment you, Joey, on comprehensive plan here and the details you provided on this. I was a little concerned about that right side where it looks like the little wetland is, you're putting the toe in. And, but after I walked down there and saw you had active erosion on the right of the dock, on that backside, this is a really well-designed project. So I want to compliment you there.
Thanks.
I like the details on your page 2 of 4 and 3 of 4, your notations there.
Sometimes I forget to put stuff on there. It happens.
Anyone else have any concerns? Ron, Hannah, Jay?
No, it needs a permit from. It needs a permit from VMRC as well, as a portion of the project is channelward of low water, and what would I would consider a living shoreline.
Well, if there, anyone in the audience wish to speak to this? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the project as per the application.
I'll second.
Been, all in favor signify by raising your right hand.
We did have public comment, didn't we?
Yes,
I'm sorry, I
thank you.
was writing.
Okey doke. Thank you. Okay,
All right, now I'm going to stand up at the podium for your next item.
okay. Next is
I need
proposed
to swear you
changes.
in.
Yeah, I'm already
Proposed,
sworn in. I swore in July of 2008.
Good for you.
Hard to believe. Madam
you
Chairman,
just
this
say?
item is an attempt by staff to answer some of the questions that have been raised today regarding Chesapeake Bay Act. You have a memo from me dated today, from Hannah and I should say, where we are attempting to address this issue, especially in light of the new guidance coming from VMRC and the new living shorelines, statutory changes. It is definitely time for the board to tack slightly and kind of address this interface. As staff, personally, I will tell you, as you know, we wear a lot of different hats and we deal with a lot of different agencies, everybody from the Department of Mines and Energy to Fish and Wildlife. And it does, there are folks out there who know how to keep agencies in their silos and how to say, all right, that jurisdiction ends here, this jurisdiction ends here. I'm just going to sail right through with what I want to do. In an attempt to avoid that occurring with, especially with the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act, we looked through, after our meeting Tuesday, Hannah and I and Bill Farrell looked through the Bay Act, and that's your page here from the Riparian Buffers Guidance Manual. Of course, there's law, regulation, and guidance. What you're looking at here is regulation and guidance. Guidance is not law. Sorry, sir. And I'll just read this. It doesn't have to go in the minutes verbatim, Crystal, but I'll just read it for everybody's edification. The highlighted part I've got there is, however, well, the Bay Act regulations permit the removal of buffer vegetation to allow the installation of shoreline erosion control projects. That's the job of this board, is to permit shoreline erosion control projects. However, locality must verify that all aspects of the proposed erosion control project meet the requirements of the regulations before allowing land disturbance or removal of vegetation within the Resource Protection Area, RPA. This should be done through a review of a Water Quality Impact Assessment, WQIA. You guys often see some of those within JPAs that are submitted to you already. Concurrent with the local Wetlands Board review, it is extremely important that the local review be done as early in the process as possible to prevent the Wetlands Board from approving a project that is inconsistent with the local Bay Act program. So I see that DEQ, at that time DCR, DEQ now, was telling us concurrent with the local Wetlands Board review, but it does go on to say the local review, meaning county staff, Hannah and myself and Bill Farrell, that the local review should be done as early in the process as possible to prevent the Wetlands Board from approving a project that is inconsistent. And that's something that needs to be done on our end before you guys see a project. We feel like by making this one change on your last section here, we've been using this JPA review sheet for years, and it probably needs some other tweaks to reflect the new regulatory changes that Jay's going to talk about. But in an immediate sense, to address the concerns expressed today and Tuesday on the sites, we felt like adding the Chesapeake Bay Act compliance as the first check when we open a JPA, when Hannah or myself prints out a JPA that's coming up, to look through and see the Chesapeake Bay Act compliance. You got a bunch of agents who already submit stuff. They put that compliance in there on the front side, and that's good. I think what we need to do is just get to a level where we're at 100% on that. And before you get it, that'll all be done, signed off by the property owner or whoever's responsible for the site. And if not, then we'll tweak it before it comes to you. We'll make sure that that's done. There are some cases, and we've had that especially happen in the last 12 months, where an agent might design a project, it's got Bay Act clarified, it comes to you, and then later on, the contractor changes it in the field. And then that will be a clear violation. You won't have to deal with that, county land use staff will. But I think that's going to help. All I'm asking for you today, staff are just asking that you consider it. This would be just an internal memo change for you guys in public meeting. It doesn't have to be advertised 2 weeks ahead of time and posted on the website like we would normally do. It's not an ordinance change. It's not a regulation change. It's just an internal procedure, policy change. We would ask that you just do it in vote form today, so that we have something to backstop us if there's pushback. We can say, no, this is the will of the board, not the staff, going off the reservation. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Y'all have any questions? Down on this end, is there any concerns?
I think this is a great step to integrate all of the arrows coming at the staff and trying to integrate this stuff, because right here it has to be integrated, no matter county ordinance, state law, et cetera. And to me, I've sat up here for about 3 years, hearing presentations, Brian, that says that's not your jurisdiction, that's not my problem, that's the contractor's problem. Well, it ends up being Brian and Hannah's problem, particularly if the upland activities change from the time this hearing stops till implementation. So I definitely support this direction. I guess the only question I had for you, is there a requirement on here about the consultant's statement regarding living shoreline suitability?
You must have read my notes I took. I think as you vote in a second, make sure also to add, direct staff to add that. I think the living shoreline statement is something that we need to be looking for. I live by checklists just personally, just because I'm that kind of person. If I have checklists for everything I do, and I think right underneath this Chesapeake Bay Act statement, we could put another line and looking for that living shoreline statement. I think that's a very
Within the JPA?
Yes, sir. Yep. Because without that, a JPA is now incomplete, if I'm
Correct.
not mistaken.
Correct.
So,
Does that, you concur with that, Mr. Woodward?
I don't know whether I concur or not, quite frankly. It seems to be like maybe a legal question for, can the Can the board require that the project is approved through the CBPA requirements before
No,
you
no,
all
that,
hear
no,
it?
my question is a statement of suitability of living shoreline required now in the JPA?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if it doesn't, then you would consider it incomplete?
I would
If-
consider it incomplete if the living shoreline statement is not included in the joint permit application.
The other thing I'd like to just comment on is that I don't think most of this is, I think this is 99% of the way we've been doing things, right, Brian? There's no new, other than we got new guidelines, but the checklist seems to be from, what was the old memorandum of,
57, yep,
and that's like 18 years old, or something like
every
that.
bit of it, yes, sir.
So it doesn't seem, it seems like most of the the majority of the applications we get are already including all of this data, so maybe this just bundles it up in a tidy package. And, because I made a list of a few things too since we were out on Tuesday, and I think this is a good thing for not only us to go by, but also to be shared with our consultants and our applicants. So do we need a motion to
I think
approve
we
the
do.
document with the
Yeah.
addition of the shoreline statement?
Yes, what we'd like to see is a motion.
I'm just
Second.
waiting until everyone has their say, and then does anyone else like to say anything? If not, I'll entertain a motion, please, to approve what we just now discussed.
Also move, and I said, I guess, I have a little concern about, do you have any concern about when we make this effective versus you have applications in the pipeline coming up next month that, do we have any concern about
You,
effective date?
that's a good idea.
Should be effective as of today, when it's approved.
But you
Yeah, any applications received after this date, you
Should
could, or you could just say July
Contain that
1st.
language
Yeah.
of information.
But you're in receipt of applications that are not privy to this policy.
Yeah. So
So are we-
any applications
Well-
received after this date,
Well,
perhaps?
what,
That's a question.
August.
Are we changing the speed limit here?
August, that gives everybody a time to, what? What do
I
you?
think July 1st is fine. Any
Okay.
application received
I think
on July
if
1st
we
or
approve
after.
them today, they become effective today.
No, any application subsequent to today that you receive.
How many applications are on the docket for July?
As of right now, I believe 7.
7.
Now, some of those are not complete per se, but we're working on them.
Well, just so we can determine when you're gonna start proposing this.
Jay alluded to the electronic thing. When I started this job, we got a manila envelope from VMRC every couple of weeks, and it had the applications in them. And now that we've gone online, what we do is usually once a week, Bill Farrell, Hannah, or myself will do a search for that time frame. So I think if you make it effective on this date, what that means is we look at the date that VMRC gave it a VMRC number. So any project that received a VMRC number yesterday won't be subject to this. Any ones that receive a VMRC number tomorrow and later,
Will be,
I think it's
okay?
fine.
Gotcha.
Because it's not an ordinance change. It's
No.
something that's already in
Just
law.
so we can determine,
And it's even on the new VMRC checklist, right under permit processing fee paid, the second thing says Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act compliance, approved landscape plan. So VMRC had already kind of been running this direction as well. So I think you doing this is totally consistent with this new guidance that Jay's going to talk about.
I suppose if there's any of those current applications you have in mind, you could always go back to the consultant and say, hey, you need to tweak your application to ensure it's there.
Yep. The
I just
Bay
don't,
Act
I just don't
is-
want to be I don't want a consultant to feel like, oh, we just pulled the rug out from under you and changed the speed limit.
Yeah. The Bay Act is 32 years old, so I think just tightening up the way you look at it, staff, before we get it to you, is totally prudent.
So I'll
I'll
restate that
entertain-
motion.
I'll entertain a new motion, please.
I'll withdraw my first motion and make a motion to approve this document as submitted with the addition of the living shoreline statement, and to make it effective with, help me, Brian, with,
June 11th?
on any application on June, or any application VMRC permitted number as of this date.
That's the date we sent it to you, or the date you opened it?
The date that it gets a VMRC number. That's when we consider it a submittal.
Okay, is there a second, please?
So what's the date?
June 11th, right? Tomorrow.
Today, June 10th, June 11th.
Tomorrow.
Oh, tomorrow, yeah.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
All in favor signify by raising your right hand. Okay. Thank you.
If y'all,
Now-
y'all permit me, I'm gonna grab Bill real quick. You can get rid of Jay.
The next on the list is the presentation by Jay.
Thank you. I'm going to show you the PowerPoint presentation that Randy showed to the commission on May 25th, asking the commission to adopt the updated tidal wetland guidelines. And there was, Bruce, you may see on your printed out version, there's speaker notes. I don't have them in front of me. I'd
No
rather not
signal.
say Randy's words. I'd
Hey,
rather
wait a minute,
explain it
Jay.
myself.
Excuse me, we don't have a signal on this one.
Your monitor's not working.
Oh,
There it is.
Yep.
That's
Not
okay.
on.
Ed-
Okay.
Edna, if I may say, my mother-in-law suffers from the same thing. It was working a second ago. I picked it up and now it's not working.
I used this.
I didn't touch
No,
anything.
electronics.
I didn't
Electronics and
touch
her.
anything.
I can't tell you how many TVs, VCRs, telephones. It should work.
It was working earlier.
Yeah. So
I don't
anyway,
have that problem because I didn't touch anything.
that's good. Don't touch anything. Along that line, I'm really not going to touch anything with this presentation. I'm going to show you the slides that Randy showed the commission during our virtual public hearing that the public saw if they chose to join us electronically. And my narrative that goes along with it is not going to be what Randy said, but that's in the verbatim if you want that as well. Bruce has some speaker notes on the printed out version of the PowerPoint. Let's move right on. This is about the tidal wetland guidelines. Next slide, please. I'm going to give you the, at the risk of reading it to you, going to talk about the history of the living shoreline guidance. Next slide, please. Original wetland guidelines 74, updated in 2005. It's signed for a new update with legislation that was passed in 2011 and 2020. Next slide. Senate Joint Resolution, Basically, the General Assembly asked VIMS to study tidal shoreline management and recommend methods to streamline regulation and encourage living shorelines. What you won't see anywhere in this presentation, this is a what do I say? It's a aside, and you won't see them in the new guidelines, is the definition of living shorelines. By now, I think we all understand what the definition says. Whether or not we all agree what that means or not, oyster shell bags, good. Core logs, great. Precast concrete blocks, what shape? This shape. What size? No higher than structural methods. That's where I think it's going to get tricky. Fill, doesn't have to be 8 feet of fill, that'll be living shoreline too. Go on, please. This is, yeah, go on. Rule of law was perfected. So the commission then proceeds to develop general permits. We've done that, 2 of them so far. Not saying we won't add more later. Encourage the use of living shoreline, encourage the use of living shorelines as the preferred alternative. Well, the law actually says, requires it unless the best available science says it's not available. And the best available science is VIMS. We'll keep coming back to that. Next slide, please. So back then, we were required to approve only, I'm sorry, not, this is the law. Next slide. Ensure protection, this is, next slide. So VIMS worked with us to, in addition to developing the general permits, develop guidelines or redevelop the existing guidelines to take into the living shoreline approach. Interdisciplinary team of scientists. Public workshops. I don't know how many of you guys chimed in. Joey, did you ever chime in on any of this stuff? Some of the agents were involved, some of the wetland board members were involved. It's like an ad hoc committee. Contractors were involved, and we got guidance that came out of that. And that's where we are right now. The initial draft, next slide, please. The initial draft, we asked for comments by March 31st. We got a lot of comments. So many that we decided, you know what? We're gonna extend the comment period, and we are going to consider this not in April, but in May. And that's what we did. Next slide. Next slide, please. There we go. This is Randy, as much as you love lists, Randy loves spreadsheets
Oh, gosh.
and pie and bar graphs and data. Loves data. This is what we received and how it's broken down. What I will tell you that Randy told me, 30 comments, I'm sorry, 77% of the comments received was a mass mailing. I, so-and-so, fill in blank here, like living shorelines and think we should do them. And I don't know who generated that, but as you mentioned before, Wetlands Watch and the Bay Act and, there's NGOs, which is non-governmental organizations, and there's SIGs, which is special interest groups, whatever. But a lot of people chimed in, not as much from the Wetlands Board. It's pretty poor representation from boards in general. I know you guys did early, and they were very comprehensive comments. I don't know what your comments were. I didn't see them. I don't know whether any of your comments made it into the guidance. I hope so.
They did.
There you go. So
We emailed them to you, too.
I did see them. I just don't remember them. I've got it in my,
Question on this slide.
yes, sir.
Those, in counting comments, those really are numbers of pieces of paper. So if like the Wetlands Board, you had the Wetlands Board of 5, if we had 27 comments within our letter,
That I don't know how Randy counted it.
I just say that a lot of governmental agencies, when this mass mailing occurs of postcards or emails, it counts as one.
Okay.
Comments to the same count as one comment. Just sharing that.
Well, I would assume from his comments about the comments that 100 comments, whether that was 100
Were
different
identical?
individuals, yes.
Okay,
Well, yeah.
got it.
And again, theoretically, if one wetland board went to all the other wetland boards and they all sent in the same comments,
Yep,
that'd be 5 comments
I got it.
from 5 boards.
Understand. Just wondering what the counter was.
Yeah. But that's Randy making the count, okay?
In the federal world, the same comment on those mass thing counts as one.
Okay. Well, we will strive to do a better governmental job than we're doing, or you're welcome.
You can expedite them. You can
However you want to look at that, you know.
Just
Good,
pass it on a hint.
good government, you know, jumbo shrimp,
Yeah.
okay? Next slide, please. Supported recognizing the need for a plan for sea level rise. This is where I was trying to go earlier. And this is not just about gaining wetland acreage. This is about the future, like Brian says, take off the microscope and maybe open your eyes to everything, and maybe holistically, let's address this stuff. As a sidebar, I'm out in the field with Lyle some time ago, Lyle Varnell, who ostensibly is the best available science. He's VIMS and, you know, he comments on these things. I see a growing field. We've all seen growing fields. This particular growing, this is over in Richmond County. If you look at this growing field from the air, you'd go, man, beautiful beach. 2,500 feet of it. Riprap revetment on the backside, where they had already put that in to stabilize what was an eroding bank. They went above high water, built a revetment. Later put in groins, added sand. It's attracting sand. It's growing so much sand, elevation, that the sand is spilling up, climbing up onto the riprap, and the plants that are planted down here in the intertidal zone are now growing into the beach zone. I said, Lyle, living shoreline? He said, nope. The riprap revetment doesn't allow the landward migration of the shoreline to address resiliency and sea level rise. Okay? But there's grass growing where it once was upland now, and it'll probably continue to grow that way as that bank is now stable. I wish I had pictures. I should have had pictures. I'm better with pictures. Randy's good with, anyway. But the answer from VIMS is no. I don't know how VIMS would look at that project we had earlier. You've got a bank, and you got 8 feet, you put some stone, fill, grass, living shoreline to a bank. That bank doesn't allow the landward migration of sea level until it erodes and does it naturally, and then it lays itself back. So I don't know. It's like building, and we've seen them before. I've argued in-house. You get a vinyl wall especially, an old bulkhead, in a relatively low-energy environment, either by adding fill and sand and plants in front of it, or maybe building a little wall in front of it, a sill, and planting that area. Bulkhead out. I just got 8 feet by 100. I got 800 square feet of living shoreline. No, that's not a living shoreline, because there's a bulkhead behind it that breaks the contiguity to the upland where sea level wants to go. Okay, it is or it isn't. I think it is. That whole landward migration, I don't see it anywhere in the definition. But that's where VIMS is looking. And that's where you guys are looking. I get it. But, you know, working for a regulatory agency for 30 some odd years with a badge that I only tried to use once, I just don't have I've got to stay here. So, next slide, please.
Let me ask you a question.
I'm sorry, and go back one if you don't mind. Yeah, go ahead.
Does that change the projected height of, say, a seal? The height of a seal?
A sill?
Yeah. I mean, is that going to increase it? the
Well, a
height?
sill, almost by definition, and I don't know that it's been defined, we're generally looking at sills as no more than 1 foot higher than. But that's 3 feet higher than. Well, it's not a sill, it's a breakwater now, I think. So, and that's part of it, is there's definitions, but there's no number that goes with that
Right.
class of, you know, groins can build beaches unless they're too tall and too long. Well, that's not a good groin. Well, what's a good, you know? So, useful life of the project, all shoreline alterations should be designed to mitigate coastal hazards, storm level hydrological energy that may, over the useful life of a project. So now you guys are going to have to look at an application and say, how long do you think this riprap revetment's going to last? Forever, I hope.
That's the
I
question.
mean, that's the intent. Well, back in the day, it's a bulkhead, we'll give you 25 years before it rots. What is the useful life of a project? I don't know what that means. Well, it's defined. Average amount of time in years. Project is estimated to function when installed properly and routine maintenance is practiced. That's a good statement. I don't know how you enforce that. Functionally resilient, 2007. There's a whole lot of data that these comments are addressing that nobody really knows still. I'm not saying there isn't sea level rise. I'm not saying that some areas it's just hard to regulate it. But the plan is, as long as what you're doing is reasonable, trying to accomplish that,
It depends on which politician you're talking to.
well, lately it's, right, yes, you're
We're going
right.
to stick with fact-based. We're going to stick with fact-based.
Yeah,
Well, you know-
the law is a fact. Okay, so next slide, please. CBPA, bam. This is where we've always been, quite frankly, since the Bay Act. Everybody agrees, great idea. Taylor Murphy, great idea. Riparian buffer. The wetlands are already protected under tidal law back since the 70s. We need to protect the area landward of the regulated protected wetlands. Private property, because, Virginia, low water state, and that's what the Bay Act does. The Bay Act initially was independent of tidal wetland review. Done locally, state law, it's getting closer and closer. I don't disagree with that. I don't have a problem with it. I just want a little help from DEQ because we're not getting it. And VMRC isn't in charge of it. You guys aren't getting it. VIM's, so we'll see if that happens. If it comes to pass that we won't look at an application until we know that the CBPA portion of that project has been approved, I don't know that we have the ability to say that's an incomplete application. That was part of your question. Your other question was, if there's no living shoreline statement, is it complete? No. We've addressed that. We haven't quite gotten this. We're going that direction. And that's the way the Secretary of Natural Resources wants it done. Next slide, please. What is the best available science? Been answered. Asked, answered. VIMS. What about Scripps, Woods Hole, Delaware, other coastal states? Nope. Well, what about them? Well, not only is VIMS the best available science, if you question that science, they answer the question is whether your science is better or not. That's what arbiter means. They determine what the best available science is. So I can see right now a project you guys get at the staff level. Man, that looks like a living shoreline to me. Contractor, I don't think so. VIMS? Yes or no? It's simple as that. If VIMS says it needs to be a living shoreline, then it's going to need to be a living shoreline. Or denied. Next slide. A portion, 100 feet? I don't know that answer. But that's why it was written into the law. Where living shorelines are not available, the project should be designed to incorporate pieces of that to the greatest degree, along those lines. That's not the exact wording. Independently reviewed. Next one. Data, on-site analysis, scale drawings, fetch exposure, that's easy. Fast land bank condition, eroding, not eroding, bank height, bank composition. Again, theoretically, you guys have the ability to say, I want a soil analysis, certified soil analysis before I look at any bank grading. Do you do that in the CBPA? Soils analysis? Hannah or Brian? Okay. So I don't know if the Wetlands Board's going to get into this now, maybe. Next slide, please. This is it. Landward migration of existing vegetation over the useful life of the project. So you have to allow for the water to come. You can't keep the water at bay. The water is coming. You have to allow it to come, and the vegetation to come. Best available science. Next slide. Shall, not may, but shall only be approved. Living shoreline approach, best available science, unless Vim says it's not suitable. So if you guys approve a project that isn't a living shoreline project, and Vim says it should be a living shoreline project, we at VMRC, I guess, will be reviewing your decision. And if we uphold your denial, did I just say approve or deny? If we uphold your denial, then the applicant can appeal the commission decision to court in Lancaster County. So they'd be taking the state to court. Next slide, please. We recommend adoption of the Tidal Wetlands Guidelines as revised, May 25th. And I believe, the way Randy said it, it wasn't effective on May 25th because that isn't the date that the commissioner signed the document that's still, I don't know if you can do a digital signature on this kind of stuff and shoot it to Richmond or whether, because that's the lawful part, but under my hand, Commissioner, this date, I don't know if that's been done yet. I believe it has. But essentially the effective date, really the effective date of all this stuff was last July with the new law. This is just the effective date of the guidelines, the adoption date. Next slide, is there something left? And there's one more he's got because he loves, yeah, there you go. And that's a pivot table analysis of public comments, which I've never heard of a pivot table. I have trouble saying pivot table analysis. Chi-square is about as far as I got, and I barely passed that. So again, this is the data, and Bruce, all here, I tend to sound, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Irreverent.
Just like Jay Woodward's what you sound like.
I've been doing it all my life. Yes, fact-based, and that's where the rubber hits the road, because sooner or later, from a regulatory standpoint, and I don't have to tell other people, riparian apportionments. Well, that's not the way I look at it. It doesn't matter. What did a judge say? What does the law say? Well, right now, we don't know how the law is going to be interpreted, because we know what it says, but we've been all dealing with it for not even a year. And we're going to figure it out together. And I think from a pragmatic standpoint, to the degree you guys have time, here comes your pile of VMRC submittals for the week. Peer, 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 peer. These two, this one, living shoreline, this one, whoa, it's not a living shoreline. Let's go take a look at it. I think it should be. Call VIMS. Back in the day, all that stuff that you guys received, VIMS has got the same envelope. And they go peer, 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 needs a permit, needs a report. And we're going to get back to that. There's 2 people at VIMS right now that are doing that, when there used to be a whole CCRM. And those 2 people at VIMS are the advisory, or Lyle and Emily. They're not writing anything before it goes to VIMS. And Mark Lukenbach and the chemical oceanography people and the guys that are raising the oysters, because it's coming from VIMS, not CCRM, and not even advisory. And Lyle, I went to school with Lyle, he was ODU. I bet it chomps at his craw a little bit that what he learned at ODU is not the best available science, because he didn't learn it at ODU and he doesn't work for ODU, he works for VIMS. I take it, the last page of, the engineering staff of the Habitat Division are an experienced conduit to provide the information of VIMS to the public. I'm a conduit. I'm happy to be a conduit, Doesn't matter if I'm an oceanographer, I'm not VIMS. So, I guess we go back a slide to questions.
It's interesting to me that the question table from the consultants, a big block of their comments had to do with integration with CBPA. So it's kind of, and I guess that's frustrating.
To the-
I do hear that from agents.
To the agents out there, yeah, and I don't know that you're changing the speed limit or pulling the rug out. I think that all of a sudden, there's a new law, and not just Lancaster, more than 5 wetland boards, all of them, 27 or something, I forget, throughout the state, are going, And, down in Virginia Beach, for instance, they've got 7 people in this 2-person department. Used to be a 1-person department. And
And they have fewer applications every month than we do, or about the same.
And it's not complete unless it's a stamped, certified, engineered drawing. And,
I know.
and then you've got the up against the bank as far as possible and stay behind the grass, the old expression. And for what it's worth, stop me, try to stop me. For what it's worth, Tony, before he left, retired, 3 or 4 times, I went in to talk to him about a project, not a living shoreline. 2 feet of encroachment channel of high water, needs a permit. Impact, non-vegetated wetland. Move it back above high water, out of the board's jurisdiction, and let the CBPA deal with it. Not saying it's right, but it gets it off our plate, and I don't know who at DEQ says, okay, I'll take a look at it. What's her, Trayvon?
Valent Laster.
Valent, I can never remember her name, Valent. I've never met Valent.
Well, it's been very difficult since March of 2020, until very recently. Many of those DEQ people did not go into the office at all, so, and we had
What?
online training.
So you throw the pandemic on top of this, and you guys volunteered for this? God bless you.
So it's the big bucks, Jay, that's why we're
The
up there.
you get the shirt.
Yeah.
I've been trying to get a shirt. I want one like
My
that one,
shirt.
though. I like the
Yeah.
dark one. I like the dark.
Well,
Goes better with my
one
eyes.
thing, Jay, I think maybe we can all agree on is every day, I'm sure thankful to the Lord that He didn't put all the resources in little silos like laws, regulations, and whatever. And we have to look at these things on a watershed scale, integrated approach. Also, I don't think anybody thinks about in these definitions, which are now law or regulation, the mean low and the mean high water and sea level are changing every day. And so if you want to go out there and put a stake in the ground today, eventually that riprap, that revetment's going to be overtopped if we look at data. And so, the whole world is changing with or without us. And so we just try to make a decision based on the best available knowledge and science today at this board hearing. So I think, the challenges are all there, but I also appreciate the fact of our staff here locally that has to try to integrate everything, including zoning, planning, building inspection, and because, I know where these folks are every day as they make decisions and see things. It's not in Richmond. It's right here, and all of this has to be integrated, enforced, and try to help people protect their property and protect natural resources. So I appreciate and sympathize with our staff and the folks here locally that have to make those calls on a daily basis because somebody's right up in their face. And I just want to express my appreciation and to you for your access. You are our official conduit. And I appreciate your ability to keep us informed. And I think, I guess too, the other thing we've heard, Jay, is that there's a move afoot by the General Assembly to amend the Bay Act at the next session. So stay tuned. Lastly, I would say is scholars in law and judicial system say a law is not a law until it's tested in court. That's when you really know you got something.
I agree, and, I don't know if anybody else has a comment, but and then I'll shut up, I promise. My biggest fear is a board will see all this and go, you know what? We don't want to do this anymore. Chesapeake did it.
I think that's I think that,
Chesapeake did it.
you're going to see
So
that.
VMRC
You're
will
going
file.
to see that.
So
You're-
VMRC won't be coming to Lancaster.
It's all yours, it's all yours.
And all you guys come down and the other thing I will say is, what I see in the short term, I hope that doesn't come to pass, certainly for the boards I work with. Because I like working for the citizens and with the citizens, I believe in it and all that. But someone somewhere is gonna get denied by a board. And VMRC will uphold that denial, because it's not a living shoreline and VIM says it should be. And that'll go to court. And then we'll see if it's a law or not.
Correct.
And in the meantime, the General Assembly meets, and the General Assembly meets, and so this may have started a whole thing down. What it may start is a whole new Bay office, like Maryland does. God forbid I sing the praises of Maryland, I still go back to, those are our oysters. But, change is good, change is hard. Change for the right purpose is certainly good. How do we do it? Well, that's your problem. The lawyers go back to Richmond, So we'll see. But I do think that a reasonable approach to all of this, and it comes down to being reasonable and what does science say. If it was just science, we would have all the data we need, we plug it in and it spits out the answer. That's not the way it is in the world.
Okay. Well, we certainly thank you. And
Thank you.
I'd like to thank all the board members, everyone, for helping me. Okay, let's see. The next on the agenda was other business as determined by members. Do we have any further business? No further business. We'll move on. Approval of minutes.
Right on time. Ding,
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second.
I'm Jay.
Raise your right hands. All right. Approved. Okay, the meeting is not, did anyone else have anything before I adjourn this meeting? The meeting is now adjourned at 10:55. Thank you.
Thank you.
all. And thank Crystal and